The sun no longer sets on Nigerians. This is because Nigerians can now be found in virtually all nations and regions of the world. In Tall Drums, we bring you stories of Nigerians making remarkable contributions to the improvement of the human condition. Here is your host, Dr. Ugoji.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Tall Drums, a Nigerian American journal. Our main guest this week is Dr. Alfred Olusegun Fayemi. Dr. Fayemi is trained in medical pathology, a field in which he has authored and or co-authored over 18 books. However, it is his passion for photography and his recent publications of books in that genre that has gotten our attention today. His favorite subjects are African people, and his works in black and white photography have begun to change the ordinary American's view of Africans. Here is an interview we conducted with Dr. Fayemi in our studios.
Tall Drums is sponsored by Songhai Corporation, publishers and consultants.
Born on July 17, 1941 in Ekiti State, Dr. Fayemi is the oldest of 4 children. He attended Itesi Methodist Elementary School at Abeokuta and Igbobi College in Yaba, Lagos State. While at Igbobi, he skipped a class due to academic excellence. He obtained his higher school certificate from Abeokuta Grammar School. For his medical training, Dr. Fayemi went to the Hebrew University Hadassah Medical School on a scholarship sponsored by the Israeli government and the World Health Organization. He met another Nigerian at the university and married her. Her name was Ayodeji Obodunri. The couple has 3 offspring, Dr. Bamidele Fayemi, Dr. Oluwole Fayemi, and Dr. Olutoyin Fayemi. Your elementary school, tell us about your elementary school and secondary school.
I actually started school in Ifakekiti. I remember I probably started about 4 when I used to go to school because I insisted everybody went to school, so I had to go. So I probably went there to play, but still I do remember what happened then. My elementary school was a Methodist school in Abeokuta. That's what I remember most. It was a Methodist school in Tesi, Abeokuta. And then from there was where I went to high school.
And high school was where?
High school was Igbobi College in Lagos, where I actually spent 4 years in Igbobi instead of 5. I was skipped over a class, right. And so I actually belonged to 2 graduating classes, which is quite rich. So I was in Igbobi from 55 to 58, which has been one of the great experiences of my life. Just staying in the school, and many of my friends were actually friends that I made then, and we still remain friends, and our families and our children remain friends, which is really remarkable.
It was a boarding school?
It was a boarding school.
And you stayed in the boarding house?
We stayed everybody was in the boarding school. It was what in the later years one of the Lagos governors called an elitist school, because he said, well, there were just too few students for the beautiful campus that was there. And so it was really a very, very beautiful experience, which we all, each time we meet, we still talk about. I'm sure everybody from the same school, they still talk about the same thing, except that having lived together in the boarding school gave us this opportunity of closeness, which has lasted a lifetime.
Okay. And then from Igbobi, after graduation from high school, then what?
Then I went to Abeokuta Grammar School for the higher school, where I did physics, chemistry, botany, zoology for 2 years. And so again, I went back to where I grew up. So it was really another experience entirely now that I was a little older. So I again enjoyed that even more. And I was like a guide to some of my classmates because they really didn't know the town, so I was able to take them around and show them where things were.
Okay. And then after that, you went to Israel for further education.
That is true.
Medical school.
From when I graduated from Alberta Grammar School, and when in those days there used to be this interval between school and university, which was hard. You graduated from high school in December, but then you didn't start the university until September, so I had that 9-month period. And during that period, I taught science at Reagan Memorial Girls School.
Okay.
And that's in Lagos. Reagan was in Lagos. Okay. And then it was from there, after I left that teaching, then I went on to Israel in November of '61 to study medicine.
And you went there on scholarship?
Yes.
From where?
I went there originally on an Israeli government scholarship.
Okay.
And we were 4 that actually left the country. We were 5 that went to Israel on this Israeli government scholarship. But subsequently, that scholarship became a World Health Organization scholarship because World Health Organization put together this particular course for medical students, for students from developing countries, of which Nigeria was one. And over a 4-year period, that course actually had 80 students from 17 different countries that attended that particular course. Okay. Then I graduated 7 years later. The course in the medical school is actually 6 years. Was 6 years. But I took off 1 year to do a master's degree in pathology, aside from the medical school, and that's what made it 7 years. So again, this was in preparation for returning to our various countries to teach medicine. That was the whole idea of the course, was to train teachers of medicine.
Tall Drums is sponsored by Sungai Corporation, publishers and consultants.
Now, at some point, you got interested in photography.
Yes.
And how did that come about?
Well, my contact with photography was actually through my wife. Somebody gave her a camera. I think her dad bought her this camera, Retinet 1A. And so when we got married, so we had a honeymoon in Europe, and so we took all these pictures. We were in Scandinavia, we were in Britain, we were all over the place because we had an opportunity to travel. So I took all these pictures, but she knew the mechanics. I took all the pictures, but she knew the mechanics of putting in the film and taking out the film. I didn't understand what. So once the film is over, the film is finished, I will give the camera to her. Okay. So that was but in terms of composition and taking the photographs, I took all these gorgeous slides. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of these slides. And of course in pathology, we do use the camera. We take photographs of specimens, we take photographs, we make slides to present at conferences. So the camera has always been there. And so like everybody else, I always had a camera. So when the kids came, then all these photographs we take, or they smile, they did this. So we took all these photographs. And that went on until my older kid in scouting had to do a merit badge in photography. And that took him, part of the merit badge was that he had to go into a dark room and make some pictures. So then I used to drive him about 20 minutes to this place where there was a dark room. And so he would go in and I would sit outside. And then one day I drove him there. I think I took Time magazine and I read the whole of the Time magazine and I decided, well, let me go and see what they were doing inside this place. So then I saw the process of somebody making a photograph from, just like a child. You project this image onto a paper and then you put it in this solution and suddenly this picture comes out. It was just like, God, what is this? This is really great. So I told the kids, I told them, I said, no, I think we could do this at home. Why do we have to drive? We could actually have a dark room at home. So then I called a friend who was into photography and he told me exactly what to buy. So we bought all the equipment. So me, myself and these two kids, my two sons. So we started going into the dark room. Naturally, everybody starts their dark room in the bathroom. So we crammed into this bathroom and we were making these pictures. And after we made, so we had all this black and white film that we had. So after we printed all the photographs, there was nothing else to do. So we had this dark room and there was nothing to print. So I called this friend again and said, what next? So he said, well, I think you should join the camera club. Okay. So then I joined this camera club. And after that, my life had never been the same.
And this was in New York?
This was in New York. I just joined, this was in Westchester County. So I joined the camera club. And this was a place where you have all these photo enthusiasts of all types. You know, some professional, some semi-professional, some amateur. So many, and everybody talked only photography. And so it was like, and then gradually I got into it. And then the height of my week was always Friday evening when the club met.
Right.
And so that was where, and then they taught you things you needed, you know, there were all these courses that you needed, you know, to do this, how to do that, and then you went on field trips, and then everybody talked about lenses, and cameras, and paper, and how did you make that photograph, and everybody. So basically that was where this enormous interest came. And of course, then we decided at home to actually have a real dark room.
Right. The images you're interested in more so are images of African people.
Correct.
I noticed, because you have 3 books, and we'll talk about these 3 books in a few minutes. But your interest in capturing the photographic images of African people have taken you to so many countries on the continent.
Correct.
Talk about that a little bit.
Like every photographer, you know, what you do is that you shoot anything that's in your neighborhood, which is essentially, you know, flowers, the mountains, you know, rivers, the whole waterfalls. So, you know, I went through all of that. And then once I had an exhibition, and occasionally something happens that changes your life. One statement is enough to change your life. And now we had this exhibition, which was a club exhibition, and there was a photograph I had taken on one of the Lagos slums of a child that was covered with sand, but then was crying. To me, it was just a great image. And somebody saw it and said, oh, how poor. And I said, well, this was not supposed to be poor. This was supposed to be, the child is doing what a child would do, which is to cry. And it's an emotion, just like you can capture the emotion of happiness, of joy. So this child, obviously something is wrong. But he said, oh my goodness, how poor. Then I said, well, something is wrong with this, you know, with this image, that everybody thinks Africa is poor. So then I decided, well, I think I really need to show people what Africa really is. Because people have this, even when they see a positive image, tendency is to interpret it in a negative way. So, and that was how this issue began, of trying to show Africa that I see, that most Africans see, that most Americans actually don't see. So that's what started me on this journey. Okay.
And that interest led to your first attempt at putting these photographs into a book.
Correct.
The first book was called Balancing Acts, Photographs from West Africa.
Yes.
And it was published by the Songhai Corporation, Princeton, New Jersey.
For years, I would do exhibitions and people would say, well, you can do a book. And I said, well, I really don't feel that I want to do a book. So every exhibition I had, whether it was a solo exhibition or in a joint exhibition, people would always say, your photographs should be in a book. So I never really paid attention. Then one time my son-in-law actually came to an exhibition I had somewhere in Soho. And he said, I think you should do a book on West Africa. And because I never really saw any cohesiveness that would make a book. And I've done books in medicine, so I understand that a book has to have a theme. And so I thought about it for 2 or 3 days. And I thought, this was a lovely idea. A book on West Africa would be very interesting. And that was how the book came into existence. And of course, I was fortunate enough to meet somebody, you know, a publisher who was going to do the work, and then decided, well, you know, you have these photographs, I think we can put this in a book. And the rest is how the book came about. Okay. And so that was how Balancing Acts came into, you know.
And why Balancing Acts? Why the title? What does that say about the photographs in the book?
The issue of Balancing Acts is actually refers to the lives of Africans as a whole. That here they're living, they have all these centuries-old culture, and now suddenly technology comes from the West, and the Western values came in. People come with the blue jeans, what I call the blue jeans T-shirts, culture, Coca-Cola, that sort of thing. And then you find Africans, trying to decide what is best. Do we maintain our old cultures, or do we embrace this new one? And so there's this balancing act to do. Deep down, we feel African. Outwardly, people want to wear their tie and jacket. They want to do Western things. But deep down, they're Africans, and they still want to eat their pounded yam at the same time. So then the question is, which one do you do? So for an African to be happy, you have to have this balancing act that must keep you, on one hand, in the Western, in the modern world. On the other hand, maintain your old culture.
Right. Okay. And the next book that came after that is what?
The next book that came after that is a book of photographs of African children that we call Voices from Within. And that book came the photographs of children from, I think, 14 or 15 different countries south of the Sahara. From the east, from the west, and from southern Africa. This is because the infant child is one that has disease and starving, and because that's the only image that's shown in the West. It's all these, very thin babies, who are feeding on breast milk that doesn't exist in the flattened and dry breast. So there's this picture that the African child is actually miserable, which is really not my experience, and which is not the experience of most Africans I know. And therefore, this book was really a very important book to put out, to say that yes, African children could be poor in material things. That's basically, you could see them, but then most of them are really very happy at most times. Most kids, once you give them food, once you allow them, give them a little clothes, something to wear, and you provide a roof, most children really don't bother about all the things that Western world seems to bother about.
Okay. And after that, the next.
Then after that, again, the next book came because of a suggestion. And I was in a book signing in Washington, D.C. for Balancing Acts. And one of the person who reviewed the for Voices from Within, and one of the guys who reviewed the book said, well, why don't you do a book on women? I said, women? I don't really think I have enough information about women and all that. And so again, when people tell me things, my first reaction may be no. But then I'll think about it later on. And what I did was to think about it. And after about 2 weeks, I decided, well, this might be an interesting book. And I went back into my, files, my negative files, and I found that I had enough images actually to do a book on women. Except that some areas where there were some, areas where images were missing. And that was the first time I actually went to Africa to specifically take photographs for an area of the book, because usually I just go back into my files and the photographs are always there. So for this particular area, which was work that women do, I just didn't have enough images of work that African women do, so I had to go to Uganda to actually fill that portion of the book. So that's how.
Now, I know that the Balancing Acts, Professor Molefi Keta wrote the forward to that.
Correct.
The next one, Voices from Within.
Was Ngugi Wathiongo.
Professor Ngugi Wathiongo wrote the forward to that. And the next one
was Obioma Naimeka.
Professor Obioma Naimeka
wrote the forward to that.
And you actually had some women and other members of the African world contribute poetry and commentary to the book on women, correct?
Correct, because for the children's book, it was easy for me to write the text.
Yes.
Since I grew up as an African child, and so it was easy, and so it's a matter of getting information from other areas. But when it came to the women's book, you'll find that in the literature, most of the stuff about women is always negative. It's actually quite a lot of negative things about women. And I just didn't know how I was going to write the text, so I decided to cheat. And the way to cheat was to actually make people write poetry for the book. Okay. And so this was actually an idea from a woman who comes from Benin, who is a poet in New York. The idea was that why don't you just let people write poetry for the book? So and I said yes. So and I contacted people. It was very difficult to convince them because they didn't know who I was. So the book actually has 15 or 16 poems, of which 13 were written by women. some of my
Okay,
colleagues.
we'll shift gears a little bit and talk about a pet project of yours, the Ebenezer Foundation.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
After the Durban conference on HIV/AIDS, one of my friends in New York, said, "Well, this is a serious disease," which I always knew because as a pathologist, we autopsy patients with HIV and all that, so we knew the disease. I said, "What do we do about it?" So I said, "Well, I don't know what you can do about it. The disease is there, people are dying, and that's the end of that." So again, 2 days later, I thought about it and I said, "Well, why don't you just let the world see what this whole process is?" Because we do get only the numbers, 25 million people are HIV positive on the continent, 2 million, 3 million people are dying annually. So we get all these numbers, but the numbers are really just, people just get numb with all those big numbers. So what I did is decided to actually put this, show the world what it looks like. So then I called a friend and they said, "Well, nobody in Africa would want on to having AIDS, so you really can't get the photographs." I said, "Well, we'll see." So when I went to Uganda to photograph this work that women do for the book, so I just asked somebody, I'd like to see, I'd like to meet with patients, people living with HIV and AIDS. And I said, "Oh," then she sent me to, Africa is a very interesting place in that regard. People always know something. So she sent me to one place, and when I got there, the people were really very willing, and they showed me around, and they allowed me to do the photography. So then I felt, now going into the people's homes, going into the clinics, and seeing them all over the place, then you really could not go back to the US and say, "Well, you do nothing." So I said, in my mind, I wanted to be sending them $100, $200 a year, just like part of the money that I would have sent to any charitable organization. But as we sat in the airport for hours and hours waiting for the plane, then ideas began to germinate that I could actually get some more money from some friends, so that this $100 could actually be a little more. And so the idea of Ebenezer Foundation came into existence, that you can actually have a foundation where people will donate money, and you can actually send the money out to these organizations, these NGOs and CBOs that actually helped you in putting together these photographs. And that's how Ebenezer came into existence. So Ebenezer now raises enough money to be able to send to, I think last year we sent out almost $12,000 to various organizations.
Okay.
One of the most precious rights of citizenship is the right to vote. For Nigerians abroad, that right does not currently exist. The fact that a Nigerian migrates from Nigeria to another land for business or for education should not deny him or her the right to participate in the election of his or her leaders during election time. If the nation of Iraq, in its chaotic state, can arrange for its citizens to vote during its elections, I submit that the most significant black nation in the world can do no less. We call on our legislators and the executive branch to make the necessary amendments to our constitution to give Nigerians abroad the right to vote. Until next week, that's our show for this week. I'm Ugoji. I wish you justice, peace, and liberty. May you become all that you're destined to be.
Soul Drums is sponsored by Songhai Corporation, publishers and consultants.
The sun no longer sets on Nigerians. This is because Nigerians can now be found in virtually all nations and regions of the world. In Tall Drums, we bring you stories of Nigerians making remarkable contributions to the improvement of the human condition. Here is your host, Dr. Ugoji.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Tall Drums, a Nigerian American journal. Our guest this week is Dr. Vincent Ahonkai. Dr. Ahonkai is Vice President and Director at GlaxoSmithKline, one of the biggest pharmaceutical corporations in the world. His career in the pharmaceutical industry has put him in positions where he has contributed to and supervised the clinical development, registration, and commercialization of products that have yielded billions of dollars in sales. He's been credited with building efficient tax teams, not only in his medical and research professions, but also in the numerous civic and professional organizations to which he has lent his time and energy. The interview with Dr. Ahonkai took place in our New Jersey studios.
Tall Drums is sponsored by Sungai Corporation, publishers and consultants.
Dr. Ahonkai, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Tall Drums, a Nigerian American journal. What was it like growing up in Edo State?
Growing up was probably the most fulfilling and memorable thing of my life so far. Because in retrospect, I enjoyed every little bit of it. It was a rural environment, like most of Nigeria was at that time, with no electricity, with no pipe-borne water, no paved road, but a lot of family, friendship, camaraderie, and just playing and growing up like a normal child in a rural environment. It was exciting. Made a lot of good relationships there.
I see. Now, you were the second of two children from your mother's side. Okay. How old were you when your dad passed?
I was probably 6 years old.
I see.
And that was something that I long for even till now. I wish I had the opportunity of growing up with my father, but that was not to be.
Okay, so he died while you were still a young child.
Yeah.
Okay, and then who replaced him as a father figure, so to speak, in your life at that young age?
Well, like you say, the village, it takes a village to raise children, and that was typical in my case. But perhaps the patriarch of my family upon the passing of my father was his younger brother, who is my uncle, who today remains one of the foremost characters in my life. He and my mother were very instrumental to what happened. He especially taking care of an expanded and extended family into which I grew.
Now, your elementary school education started where?
In the village at Ora, and it had a central elementary school to which the surrounding villages came to. And it was, a very rudimentary form of schooling, but absolute high-level standard of teaching.
Okay, and from there you went into secondary school?
Went to secondary school, and that meant going away from the village, which was an extraordinary eye-opener to me. I had never been in a vehicle to travel anywhere.
Okay.
I had never seen a paved road until I went for the scholarship examination for the secondary school, which took place in Ibadan. And the tenant in our home was fortuitously the person who read about my being invited for interview in Ibadan. Otherwise, I would have missed it. Read it in the newspaper, and he told my mother that, and his wife volunteered to take me there.
Okay.
Which was great.
You went and you obviously got the scholarship, and you attended secondary school at.
It's one of the then government colleges, Edo College in Benin City, and I was there from class 1 to upper 6, which was 7 years of education. Absolutely phenomenal.
At the end of which you received a scholarship again to study medicine.
That is correct. I received another scholarship, which I might add that, again, fortunately, I had a scholarship to get into higher school from Shell BP.
Oh, okay.
And that was the time that Shell was really investing in human capital.
Now, why medicine?
Why medicine? For a number of reasons. First of all, I mean, growing up in my village, education was viewed as the most important aspect of your future. And so I strove, like most other children, to attain the highest that I could. And they used to say that the brightest kids went to the university, and the brightest and smartest kids became doctors and engineers. I said, that's what I'm going to be, one of those. But what made me choose medicine was my younger brother died of an illness that was, in retrospect, preventable. And as I grew up, I began to think about the impact that had on me. And I thought, what better thing to do than to change the dynamics of my society in that little community, if I could, by being a doctor who could, impart some positive changes as time goes on. And I'm very pleased that I made that decision.
Okay. So your medical studies was done at the University of Lagos?
It was at the University of Lagos College of Medicine. I spent 5 years there, as was the standard period that you went to medical school. And it was, again, a very enriching and fulfilling experience.
It was around that period that you fell in love with your wife and you met your wife. Is that correct, in Lagos?
Yes, I met my wife in Lagos when I was just finishing my medical school education. She was already also a graduate and had been in the Ministry of Education, and we met through the usual circumstances that young people meet, through friends and so on. And clearly there was something that sparked, and the rest, like they say, is history.
And what's her name?
She's Bernadine Kamara Sukwo.
And you two have how many children now?
We have 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy.
Tall Drums is sponsored by Songhai Corporation, publishers and consultants.
What brought you to the United States, and what were your impressions of the U.S. Prior to coming here?
What brought me to the U.S. is really in retrospect, purely, shall we say, accidental. It wasn't planned. That's, most of my life has not been really scripted. What happened was, in the last year of medical school, a number of more aware students started saying, you know, the way to prepare for your final exams is to do this American exam. It's an American, it's a qualifying exam that makes you eligible to train in the U.S. Prior to that, I didn't have any plan to train in the U.S. It was usually in the U.K. So the exam is called ECFMG, Educational Council for Foreign Medical Graduates, which we did, and used it as a stepping stone for our final exams, and it went very well. So well indeed that I said, well, maybe, you know, now that I'm eligible, maybe I should consider going to the U.S. as most of my classmates were doing. Prior to that, that didn't happen in the history of that school. Okay. So that's how I decided to come to the U.S.
Okay, and then upon arrival?
Upon arrival, I was very fortunate in that I actually did have a job, a program to go into, which was very unusual then, from home. So I went directly to my program through an old school boy of mine, secondary school boy, one Moiche. Thank you, Moiche, wherever you are, because he helped me pick me up from the airport. And of course, you know, I was dazzled, mesmerized, and everything by what you saw. Stayed in New Jersey. We're in New Jersey, yeah. I stayed in New Brunswick with him for a while, and then he took me to New York City, and then to my program. It was a shock. It was a culture shock, to be very plain about it. But it was not an issue for me because I was already decided that I had to do what I had to do, irrespective of what was happening in the landscape.
Trace for us what your career path has been since you arrived in the United States.
My career path has been what I look back upon as very fulfilling. I mean, to me, that's the most important thing. I've been very fulfilled. I've had the opportunity to do precisely what I wanted to do, what made me happy.
Which is what?
Which is do what you're comfortable doing. In other words, I started off with a training program which lasted 3 years, and I chose a specialty, infectious diseases, that I was very pleased with and had the opportunity to have it carved out for me, even though the program was non-existent then, but based on the relationship I had with the program director, we had that opportunity. And I went on to join the faculty and doing some bench research, and then was invited by Mark Sharp and Dome Research Labs, they were called in those days, on the basis of some of the research I was doing. And I thought it was a great opportunity to have intellectual, stimulation as a researcher, clinician, and the funding for it that the pharmaceutical firms seem to have, compared with getting funds for your research in the academic institution. So I took the opportunity, not knowing what it was. Again, it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made, to transition from academia into the pharmaceutical industry. And I've had a tremendous experience, grown over the period, and I'm now in a position that I can influence things in a very positive manner, and I'm happy to look back and see that it was a good choice. Well, I'm an executive at GlaxoSmithKline, which is a company that's about 4 or 5 years old. It came upon by the merger of Glaxo Wellcome and SmithKline Beecham, which is the legacy company that I was at. And I serve as vice president in the research and development sector of the company. and my specific role is being in the function of assuring that interaction with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which is the governing body for all drug product development in the U.S. My role is to be sure that we are in compliance with what the U.S. government regulations are, and to bring the highest quality of research, ethics, and those desirable things to our product development, make sure that we're able to get a speedy approval. The most important thing that I can look back very positively is the line of products for preventing diseases. Remember, I was telling you that I lost a younger brother when I was little.
Correct.
And he died from a communicable, preventable vaccine, preventable disease. I think he must have had measles, and he had febrile convulsions and died ultimately. So perhaps one of the things that I'm most happy about is the line of vaccines that I've been involved in, that GlaxoSmithKline has been involved in, that on a global basis. GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, produces vaccines globally that account for several millions of people worldwide to prevent diseases that you die from, especially from my area. So measles, mumps, rubella, things like whooping cough, things like hepatitis A and B, and very fortuitously, we are now working on a malaria vaccine. Malaria vaccine, which will change the face of the earth, because malaria is perhaps the #1 killer of children as we speak worldwide. Forget AIDS. It's not that AIDS is not important, but the most problematic things for us are things like measles and malaria, preventable diseases.
You are the current national chairman of the Nigerian People's Forum, NPF. Please tell us, give us a little bit of history of NPF, what it is about, and how you got to become the chairman of NPF USA.
Well, that's a very good question, and I am really pleased, first of all, to be here with you, as I told you previously, because you epitomize the character, the profile, and the quality of the people that form the leadership and membership of the Nigerian People's Forum. In other words, individuals who are well respected in the communities, who have attained a good reputation in their career, and who have the spirit of their native country in mind, and who are exemplary in a way that they are able to speak freely towards some of the issues that we have back home in Nigeria. So the Nigerian People's Forum is an organization of Nigerian Americans and Nigerians in the USA, as you very well know, that are interested in galvanizing their resources collaboratively to do basically two things. One is to develop a platform for networking amongst themselves, to create a position of the 419 and the duplicitous relationship that we are known for, to move from there to, there are some good things from Nigerians. There are good people, unsung heroes, and we're going to make sure you begin to know about them by what we do. That's number one. The second is to work collaboratively with the private and public sectors in the U.S. and the Nigerian leadership to ensure that we improve the life of the common person in Nigeria.
What advice or what cautionary tales do you have for folks who want to come to the United States? And if you were to do it over again, would you come?
If I were to do it over again, I'll start from that question. I would come because I came with a purely innocent mind of, in fact, I thought I was going to go back fairly shortly after my training, which was the background that everybody had when they first came. But the dynamics and the environment back home just did not permit for that to happen. I'm not a bit sorry for that, by the way, because I believe that people like myself, yourself, are in a position to contribute in a significant manner to what's going on back home. But word of advice, if you will, to those who are just coming in or planning to come in, it pays to do the right thing. That's all I can say. I mean, I've had the opportunity to do nothing but the right thing. I try to here, and people I know and myself would be very happy, raise a family, children who have succeeded in going to academic institutions that I can be very proud of, the highest level academic institutions, having good jobs and so on. But it's by hard work. Nothing comes easy. Nothing comes easy.
There is something that compels those of us who are removed from home to be homesick and to seek to stay as close to home as possible by being close to fellow Nigerians abroad. In situations of such hunger and thirst for each other's camaraderie, we tend to discard with a lot more ease some of the ethnic and religious identities that appear so glaring and important in Nigeria. Nigerians abroad invariably find that some of the greatest acts of kindness and support we receive abroad come from fellow Nigerians. However, our diversity as a people will not automatically manifest as a blessing for us unless those who lead us understand that diversity must be managed for desired and measurable nation-building outcomes. Above all, we must work at defining for ourselves what it means to be a Nigerian in the 21st century. Permit me to suggest that the meaning of the Nigerian identity at home and abroad should be one of liberty, responsibility, and pride. Liberty in the choices of life, responsibility for our intertwined destiny, and pride in a unique identity that projects us as the real hope for a new, consequential, and transformational civilization. Let us define our greatness by how high we enable the shortest amongst us to reach, by how justly and fairly we treat the least liked amongst us, by how much protection we provide for the weakest and the disabled amongst us, and by how much self-sustenance we create for the poorest amongst us. Until next week, that's our show for this week. I wish you all justice, peace, and liberty. May you become all that you're destined to be.